All right.
Uh,
Good morning, folks. Bear with me one second here, and we'll jump in and get started. If my voice cracks like I'm 13 years old, I apologize. I'm getting kind of hoarse here. However, we are excited that you're here today, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. As always, for our Wednesday webinars, Julia Nikishna is here to talk to us about Studio Designer Essentials for new users. This is going to be extremely important, especially wrapping up our year-end webinar series, as we got a couple more of these webinars for you all. But this is going to be super essential in terms of what you should be doing first, second, third. I'm going to let Julia go into this because this is her level of expertise. For those of you who don't know Julia, she offers bookkeeping and accounting support, including CFO services for both large and small businesses. She specializes also in unique and complex accounting needs. Numbers freak me out. So, this again is another area that she is extremely eloquent and knowledgeable in. But more specifically geared for the interior design firms and showrooms. And she also has comprehensive procurement services for designers and showrooms that she would love to share with all of her clients. That being said, the last bit of house cleaning we have to do. This is a Q&A webinar, so by all means, at any point in time, do not leave your questions to memory. Make sure you drop them in the Q&A box. There's a little question mark excuse me, in your Zoom toolbar. Click that, that'll pop up the window. Throw your questions in. Julia will get to them as we go along. And with that being said, Julia, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Hi, that was an intro. How are you?
Was it?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, all time zones covered. So as Anthony had mentioned, you have a Q&A box wherever your Zoom toolbar is. So please, please, please feel free to ask any questions that you have, especially because I'm assuming so many new users are joining the webinar today. I'm going to cover what I would probably call tips and tricks in terms of how to utilize some of the settings and some good best practices when we're in some of the again some of the settings on the studio side. So whether you are maybe brand new to studio or you've been in studio now for the beginning of the year, let's talk about some of the some of the profile items that are really great and really super helpful. So always remember, under settings is your company profile up here. So your company profile, the way you set up some of these codes will then flow into your vendors and clients. So if you've done the homework of the company profile, then every time you set up a new vendor or a new client, some of those fields will be set up automatically for you. So let's actually just start at the top. So company information, obviously self-explanatory. I would make sure that your EIN is in here, right? We're in the middle of tax season. And for example, we just wrapped up 1099s for some clients, and not everyone has their EIN listed. So just be in the habit of making sure that it is filled in this box. We're going to actually just jump right into codes over here as well. So these defaults, like I mentioned, flow through into your address IDs. So I'm going to talk about how we see some of these boxes utilized, and some of them are actually in a bit of a creative way, but hopefully will be helpful to you. So the way designer can be utilized in a lot of firms is whoever the senior designer managing a project, that box here is actually filled in on your client. So it's not defaulted typically in the company profile at all, because there's different designers working on different clients. Because you could pull reports on this particular box to say who's working on which client for profit sharing purposes, lots of different reasons. The terms box here is actually a box associated with your vendor terms. And this is or can be a really great tool to use to communicate how a vendor wants to be paid. So if you go to vendors, and I usually always go to First Dibs. That box is here, terms, but it doesn't clearly say that this is related to the vendor, but this is related to the vendor because funny enough, right? This is actually related to the client. So this terms box is can be used as a communication tool to say, how do vendors prefer to be paid? Do they like to be paid with a credit card, with an American Express, or do they not take American Express? Are they an international wire or a domestic wire? So if you're filling this box out ahead of time on the vendor side, when somebody new is going to process an order from First Dibs, they could go directly into this box to say, oh, I see that First Dibs requires a wire. And actually my wire payment can be located within the note section or within the images and attachment section. So this is the terms too that are defaulted within Studio. I would actually say they're not my favorite. They're not necessarily user friendly. So we usually always override them and add our own custom payment terms for vendors. So if you go to the magnifying glass, you'll see these filled out here. So for example, I know Studio comes with net 30. If you go to edit, there'll actually be deposit percentages filled out here as well. Make a note, and Anthony, I'm pretty sure I'm saying this correctly, but if you have terms filled out on a vendor and your terms here list a deposit percentage, the deposit percentage here will override the vendor code deposit percentage, this purchase deposit. So just be very, very mindful. That is also one of the reasons why I don't like the terms that come with the program. I would love a term that says like American Express. I'm going to leave my deposit percentages blank, my net days blank, my discount blank. And that's the code that I'm going to use when I set up a new vendor. Or I'm going to then also say, well, yes, I pay things with Amex. And I also know domestic wire. I pay things with a domestic wire. Again, all of these here are blank. That's just my personal preference. And I go to save. So my terms, again, are utilized as a payment term for the vendor. And it's the vendor's preferred payment term. Because as we know, you can be in a crunch time and I don't know, they require a wire versus an ACH, but there may be reasons you deviate. But to start off with, preferred method here. And so,
Yeah, I think that's how the hierarchy goes. There's a
yes.
hierarchy to what overrides what, and that, it starts at your blanket, settings in my company codes. Then the address ones override those. Then the item codes override addresses in my company,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth down to sales code. And then you can manually adjust the item too at the very basic field function level.
This one, I think it can be really tricky because I don't necessarily think it's somebody's go-to. So if you accidentally select 100% here, right? And then and your vendor says 50, I just don't think it's logical for somebody to be like, oh, but First Dibs says 50, how come it keeps populating 100? So I just think this entire field can be just a bit confusing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And deposits and percentages, not necessarily deposits, but when you're talking about like blanket settings, this is a question or an issue that comes up a lot where we find um I don't want to say a mistake, but just like something that's overlooked is
Yes,
the different percentages and like, you know, folks are like, wait, why is this so skewed? Like that's not, and they don't recognize it until it's like far along in the process of the proposal or even an invoice or
yes, yep.
purchase order. So yeah.
Yeah, and we'll cover that too on both the address ID, the client ID, and then the item. But just know that this very, like, again, tricky box has implications, especially on the vendor side. Copy purchase is next. So copy purchase is, I would say, a super old field. It can be, it's really great. I think it's indicative of what it means. And so we get this question a lot. Well, what does copy purchase mean and what should I set it to? So my recommendation on copy purchase is to always set it to always. And what does copy purchase mean? So copy purchase literally means if you have it toggled on any item, so 19th Street is Mr. Tom Hanks. He's my test client. He and I are very close. I talk about him often. I don't want to look at inventory. Is this inventory? No, it just says, it's funny, this vendor is blank. Oh, it's invoiced. Not inventory TBD. No, invoiced. So here, light bulbs. So Copy purchase is a shortcut to make sure that anytime you enter a unit cost on the purchase side, it copies over into the selling side. So it is a toggle on your company setting, and then it's a toggle in your client ID. And so what does that mean? So on the company level, do you want your projects to be set up with copy purchase turned on always? The logic is it's preventing you from making a mistake. And so we usually receive pricing for the purchase cost, the purchase order first before it gets to the client side. So if you notice on this item, my copy purchase is turned on to always. It's now located in this pricing table. And so as soon as I entered $1,500 into the purchase cost, it copied itself over into the selling cost. Because copy purchase is turned on, I can't override my selling cost. I can't, it won't let me. And it won't let me until I change copy purchase to off. And so then I could go in and say, yes, I do actually want to sell this for less than I bought it. So it's like a safeguard. It works really well, and it should be kept as copy purchase always. If you mark up by either the client or by the vendor, meaning that this number and this number will always match, and then you're using your markup field to dictate how you're marking up product. If you don't necessarily want the unit cost and the selling side to match because you want the retail price to appear down here, copy purchase, for example, may not be the best use of your time in terms of your settings. So think about what your contracts look like and how you mark up to determine if this is the right use and the right box, I would say, for you. So if you want it to always be on, turn it on here. And if you want it to never be on, have it be on never. 0 is actually not my favorite. 0 literally means that you could change copy purchase to everything but 0. So I could make it $1, but it won't let me make it 0. So that one is just not one that I typically resort to. I either go to never or always. But a really great thing to remember and to keep, again, turned on to avoid making or avoid losing money, really. So remember, specify only for anyone in maybe any hospitality or commercial spaces. If you're ever just in the need to send specs, here's your button for that. I find that you would never be turning this on the client level, or I'm sorry, on the company level. You would be turning it on the client level, because that would then flow into your items. And so Studio allows you, if you have specify only turned on, so at the moment it says no. If you have it turned on, you could send purchase orders to a purchasing agent if needed, for them to do all the ordering without having it impact your general ledger. So we'll look at it on the client ID, but then in the item, like I could go into this first dibs item, that's my light bulbs, let's just hit save. If I turned specify only to yes, if you notice, my selling side goes away and the only boxes that are left are my markup, because the system is prompting you to say, oh, okay, well, yes, you could generate a purchase order. And maybe I also want to collect just the markup from the client because I specified the actual item itself. So, and as Anthony had mentioned, right, all of the codes here flow into addresses, which is clients and vendors, and then flow into items. But I'm still able to override any of my codes in my item screen. You don't necessarily want to be doing that item by item by item, because it's going to make the item entry a lot longer. But what you do want is you want your codes to be set up as seamlessly as possible, so that way your item entry is really fast. So that's one I point out often. Fill out these accounts in terms of which general ledger accounts you'll be in most often. But I would urge you to make sure that for the item screen, you're reviewing these side marks. So how do you want to side mark? Do you want to side mark by order or by each item? I actually like each item. And then do you have a preference of how you generate a purchase order? So do you want one order per vendor, one order per room, or one order per item? I would say one order per vendor is the most common. It does require you to have the same client and the same ship tos. So remember, if you have 2 items and they have the exact same client and the exact same vendor, but the ship tos are not the same, the system will automatically create 2 purchase orders for you because the ship to is very, very critical on a purchase order. And then how do you want invoices displayed? One invoice per client, per proposal, or per item? We do still have, I would say, a handful of firms that are one invoice per item. That's actually my least favorite. I do like one invoice per client, just as a personal preference. Time billing is usually its own animal and its own module. If you're not familiar with time billing and you're not time tracking in Studio, it really is, especially over the years, they've made a lot of improvements. It is really great. It'll give you a lot of valuable data and feedback. So if your module is where it needs to be, the system is asking you, right? Anytime you use the time billing feature, where do you want those entries to go? And so the time billing room is defaulted. That is where they should be going. And the reason why is you want to be able to pull a report where you could see profit, for example, in time billing, right? So I want to, 19th Street is my test client, right? So in 19th Street, I have a room called time billing because my preferences are set up that way. And here's time billing. So this is how much money I've generated from time billing. So that trick to that is right here. So time billing room. So make sure either this is filled out for you and it says time billing, or at least make sure that it's not blank. And if you don't like the verbiage time billing, rename it, but to something that's indicative for you that has to do with design fees. I'm an advocate of small image sizes. That's really funny. This test, I wonder if Robert's going to yell at me. I like these to be tiny. I do. I like them to be tiny. I don't like them to be big. But I'm also not a visual person. So my image size is normally defaulted to 200. And then back to item side mark, which we'll look at a purchase order. This is only applicable to your purchase order. So if you like the purchase order to be side marked by individual items, please have this turned on to say item side mark both. I think those are like the bigger ones that I like to cover for shortcuts. We get a lot of requests of, I don't like that the time billing invoices out of Studio say time billing. So if you notice under report defaults, that's where you could name proposal, order, acknowledgement, and invoice. And so here in this database, somebody went in and changed it to say hourly fee invoice. We have it in a lot of our clients just say invoice as well, because it's a preference of the design firms. If you have a custom proposal or order or invoice, or if you like a specific one that's already in the database, set that default here. It'll be such a time saver for you. So I like proposal image left. Let's go with order format 2, and let's go with invoice image left 2. So when we get to the item screen, you'll see how all of these then very quickly, when you click on purchase order, proposal, or invoice, they'll default directly to this view. Let's actually skip over that one and then go to save and close. So we covered some of the highlights of the company settings, and now those settings trickle down into our vendor and clients. So if we go into, so I'm in First Dibs. So now I'm in First Dibs. Hopefully you filled out as much as you can in here. If you're not using Studio to manage your user ID and passwords for your vendors and your trades, this is a great time to transition. It's the beginning of the year. Here's your website and your user ID and password. And then anybody who's logging into Williams and Sonoma Home has the login in one place, and then also has the ability to change the password if passwords updated, if a password is updated. Actually, somebody's asking a question if they can't see my company in settings, and potentially that could be a permission depending on if you're a principal or maybe not an admin at the firm.
Yeah, 100% that has to do with permissions.
So if that is something you feel like you want to see, that would be a question for whoever's managing.
Either
Whoever,
if they're
yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm dying. If it's not permissions, it's always, if you can go to employee really quick up there, Julia. A lot of new users, like new user profiles, scroll all the way to the bottom. There's that user ID field right there where it says Angeline Daily.
Huh?
Right there, like that can severely limit the view, the access to things, because that's the license that you actually are being billed by that's attached to the user profile. And I think this is actually important for new users as well when you're creating other users as you hire, or even if somebody's leaving your company. What I see a lot, and I'm talking from last January, there was 141 requests coming over for adding new users. And what happens is a lot of times users will just firms will create the user profile, what you're looking at here, but they haven't created the user
Uh-huh.
ID. And my favorite, most easy way to do this is if you can go real quick to that gear for settings and then go down to add remove user. Right there. Scroll all the way down. All you would need to do is do first name, last name, and email address and click add, and it'll create both for you. And
Mhm.
the last thing that you have to do is just go in and adjust those permissions and maybe put in some personal information like addresses, whatever you need to. But that's the quickest way to link a license and a profile, create them all at the same time, and make sure that there's a smooth process when that person's logging in for the first time. That's
Yep.
my spiel for today.
Um, Anthony, I actually also like, I never create them out of employees because I find it very confusing.
I'm working on getting
Yeah.
our development team to like hopefully merge like these two sections to make it more cohesive, or uh there's going to be some more messaging and instruction on the page so people actually
Mhm.
understand what they need to do to get them moving along quicker, because that can be really annoying when you create a user and you're like, okay, why can't they log in? And then you have to
Mhm.
reach out to support and go through that process, which if I can mitigate that and get you, going at lightning speed and focus on the more important things, then that's my goal.
The other thing I just learned, I'm sorry if this is, I just learned this yesterday. I could never change this name. And maybe this is new, but I used to always have to reach out to support.
Yep,
So if you now unclick this button down here, you could now change the name associated with potentially an existing user. So this can come up, especially if you're reassigning users. Even if you've had support change the email address associated with the user, it still then doesn't change the employee name. So now you could unlock and lock yourself versus having to go through support, which I actually think is immensely helpful also.
definitely. And then one caution to that though, if you consider reusing a license or a profile or whatever, just know that whoever had that profile prior to this new user, will their data will now be mixed. Like when it comes to time billing and things like that, we don't recommend that. However, it is possible
Mhm.
and we can do it for you if need be, and that's how you want to work it out. And there's a couple back end things, but we always would recommend is deactivating the license, creating a brand new one. You'll get a prorated amount if that's what the situation calls for it. So you're just swapping a license out, which really isn't, any extra cost in that regard. But that is one caution to reusing licenses and profiles, just so y'all know.
I'll have to show you. I wonder. I reached out to support yesterday on something similar where the user ID and the email was correct, but this name was tied to an old employee, like
And
an employee that I haven't even seen there. I would say in like 2 or 3 years.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, I can show you, but I didn't know that this now toggled this name off and on.
fairly new feature within
Yep.
the last, I'd say, 8 months.
But yes, I don't disagree. Always settings and add new users to make sure that the way you want the information to flow is consistent for the user that you're adding. I just think it makes it a little bit more streamlined. Um, so back to addresses though, right? So now you have employees, and so you're tracking all of your user ID and passwords directly here, right in these three boxes, which is great. You've added in as much information into your address section as possible on the vendor. And if you go to codes, here's that code that I was talking about. So now you have somebody new at the office. They have no idea how First Dibs is paid. If they go into the vendor ID before they create their PO, they'll be able to see, oh, First Dibs preferred method of payment is American Express. Great. So now they don't have any questions. Additionally, these two boxes, well, actually three boxes, but most likely two boxes, these flow to your item. So every single time you make an item, so right, we're in, what are we in? We're in 1,000 bulbs. This deposit percentage also flows over to your purchase order because it's your communication tool. It's what you're telling the system the vendor wants on an initial purchase order. Do they want 100% or 50%, right? Those would be the two most common. So set up your vendors with the most common deposit required on a purchase order. So for first dibs, we usually are paying 100%, right? We don't have a long lead time with first dibs, and they're not charging our credit card, 50% deposit on a custom order. They're most of the time charging us 100% when we order. So I want my purchase deposit here to reflect 100%, and I want my purchase tax deposit to reflect 100%. Now, you shouldn't be paying sales tax on your orders, so you could also leave this at 0 if you'd like. But this box here flows over into this box here. So this is sales tax on the order if the vendor is charging it to you, but they really shouldn't be. That is a much, much bigger conversation. And I'm sure there's a separate webinar on tax as a whole. If you are a firm that marks up by vendor, meaning you share your discounts, so your contract doesn't say that a client is marked up 35% for all product, and that instead you share discounts. So that means on a Williams and Sonoma home, this number is 10% because Williams and Sonoma home, your trade discount is 20%, but on a Restoration Hardware, your discount is 70, so you're sharing a discount here of 35. So if you know that you mark up by vendor, this is the box where your vendor markup would go. I would advise that typically that you'd be marking up a specific way on all of your projects, meaning you know that you mark up by client across the board, or you know that you mark up by vendor across the board, or you could even mark up by sales code, which hopefully I could show you that as well. But if you wind up being in one of those three most common options, with client markup really being the most common, make sure you're taking advantage of this box, because every single time then you enter, so let's do one. So we're in, we went to, let's go. So we're in 19th Street. Oh, let me actually save. So address details. So we're going to save. And we're going to go and enter two first dibs. It didn't, so first dibs. And if you notice, my markup populated, right? And so if I then made my markup in for first dibs, I don't know, 10%. And I go to a new item. Whoops. Or maybe it didn't refresh, or maybe I didn't refresh. Oh, it didn't like my country. Go to save again. New item, no, new item again. And here's my 10% now. So if that's not something you've automated for yourself in the past, as you're entering items, I lost my vendor. As you're entering items, go into the vendor ID settings and change this, again, if it's applicable to you only. If you go now to the right, under 1099, yes or no, and then federal ID, we've been talking about this topic, I would say really ad nauseum prior to January 31st, right? It was 1099 season. So here's your box to say yes or no, and then here's your box for your EIN and your social. A newer-ish feature, which has been absolutely amazing and has changed somebody like myself, it's changed my life, is this images and attachment section on your vendor IDs and your client IDs. It's one of my favorite additions, and it's now been around for a couple of years. You could now add anything that's an image or an attachment to a vendor or client ID. So I suggest adding all of your W-9s and even your certificate of insurances, which are located down here, to the vendor directly. And so if you go to upload files, create a folder down below that says W-9s test, or I could just say W-9s. So add a new folder up here, right? Create it and begin to save all of the W-9s that you received from vendors directly on the ID itself. Best practices. Anytime you work with a new vendor, you should be requesting a W-9 from them. Now, I realize that is daunting and tedious. So are you asking for a W-9 from Target? No, you are not. But are you asking a W-9 from anyone who's doing any sort of labor, receiving in warehouses, anyone in the construction space, and even custom furniture manufacturers, because there's a component of labor within the custom furniture space. So, and anyone who is smaller than a Target, right? So you may not know whether Joe's Upholstery is an LLC, an S Corp, or a C Corp. You have no idea. So unless you get into the habit of requesting a W-9 from them, that'll be your indicator of then how to fill out these codes. Same with certificate of insurances. Now, the one I would say downfall, like, these are really great fields, but if you're in a big city and you're in a high rise and you're working with Joe, the electrician, Joe, the electrician, is going to need to give you a certificate of insurance for every high rise he's working in. So if he's working with 3 of your clients, you're going to need 3 certificates. So you could add them all into images and attachments. You could also add them into the client ID images and attachments as well. So, or you could add them into both, right? Too much is never the wrong approach, especially when it comes to something like this. So just keep that in mind as you're going through and setting up new vendors and thinking of your own process of, what do I ask from a vendor the first time I begin working with them. Expense account here for those of you who are either importing directly into Studio for anything administrative expense related. This is the memorized account for anything that says Uber. So if we go to, I don't, we should have Uber in here. Uber. I don't know what that is. Let's try taxi. Taxi. So taxi is a vendor. Taxi needs a United States as the country. And under codes, my default expense account for anything that's administrative is set up here. So I want this to go to travel. I want anything that I ever post for taxi to automatically pop up and say, okay, it's travel. Now remember, like everything else in Studio, you could override it on an individual level, but I'm just looking to set these codes up to get my data into the GL as quickly as possible. So that's that field. Under every vendor and also every client, contacts here has been phenomenal. Also, again, a newer-ish feature, but really, really great. So you can now create, so right under addresses, it limits you to 1 name and 1 email address. Where is it? Right here. But if you have multiple, go into contacts and start creating. Start creating additional contacts. Test. Oh, I guess well, just add me. And this is Robert's email address. And then under the contact section, you have these drop downs. So if you're someone who's been emailing orders at a Studio or emailing proposals or invoices at a Studio, if you set up your contacts under every vendor or client, you could then automatically send a purchase order. I don't want to say automatically. When you go to the email screen, when you go to the email screen, anyone in your email orders to will populate. So I don't know, so we're in first dibs, so we could go to one in first dibs. And then it's just a quicker, easier way of getting, of not typing emails into either Gmail or Outlook. So it'll manage all of your contacts here for you as well. So I think the question maybe here is the difference between site address and mailing address? What is the difference between address ID? Oh, this one, address ID. Oh, that's a great question. So address ID is literally internal. It is your own shorthand, your abbreviation to managing how you code your vendors. So this ID here doesn't populate anywhere. If you're, what's actually in first dibs. So for this vendor, right, first dibs, we didn't put anything into the name. Name and name is blank and our address is here, but we have an address ID. If we go to a purchase order for first dibs, our purchase order name will now be blank because we took it out. So there's lots of different systems and thought processes, right? So see, it's gone. So your address ID for both client and vendor is all internal. And so you can have a system as to what you want it to look like. Do you want it to be the first 5 digits of a vendor name, 7 digits, 10 digits? And then the same on the On the client side, what do you want this code name to be? Do you want it to be a number? Do you want it to be a street name? Do you want it to be a last name? So just a way to manage the data. Notes are great, right? Everything could be time stamped. So if this is a communication tool for you for banking, this is my banking information. Or if you wanted to upload banking, if it's in the form of a PDF or an attachment to images and attachments, that's a great workaround as well. On the client side, so where is 19th Street though? I think he's a project. So client project. Let's actually just go through some of the basic fields. So same as vendors, you're limited to one email address, right? So if you have multiple, go into contacts and set up as many as you see fit. And then if you want to email orders, oops, not orders, if you want to email proposals to the contact setup, make sure you're selecting email proposals down here. Something to make note of. So your client side mark, and this actually ties into the question about address IDs. So on every single purchase order, let's actually refresh this page because we've added first dibs back. Every single purchase order will have a side mark. Hoping everyone could see. So this side mark, so Studio Designer is our our company. 19th Street is our client. This is the room. And this is the item. Test item, JN, detail, detail, detail. I did a really, really great job. This here, 19th Street, where does this come from? Like if you said, if you had that listed as Tom Hanks, you may actually not want client or vendors to know that you're working with Tom Hanks. So the first time you enter an address and you create an address ID, it copies it directly into here, client side mark. But if you then ever go in and decide to change your address IDs, it will not repopulate into your client side mark. You would need to know that, oh, I changed my ID. I now need to change my client side mark. If you then wanted your client side mark to say Tom Hanks, if we refresh this, the new side mark should flow into the side mark on the purchase order. So if you have a system for it, if you like it to appear a certain way, or if you're looking at your order and you're actually just not sure where this is coming from, this particular field here is coming from your ID. So let's get rid of test because yes, that is a test client, but we can actually leave Tom Hanks. Tax locations. Hopefully you're either setting those up correctly or you're enrolled into automated sales tax or you're asking for advice if you need it. But let's go down to these markup percentages. So we talked a lot about vendor markup on the vendor side, which flows through to your item. But if you then decide to mark up by client, the selling markup percentage is here on the client ID, and you would want it defaulted to whatever your contract states. So if your contract isn't clear or if it varies by sales code, then this here would potentially be 0 and you would be changing the markup on the sales codes. But if your contract states that you're marking up 35% across the board, this will flow into every single item that you create. Your selling deposit, how do you want to collect deposits on new items? Do you want those to be 100% of the proposal or 50? 100% I would say is most common. So you want this, this, and this to be 100% because it becomes incredibly painful to change those on every single item. So I'm sure we have some test item in here. You don't necessarily want to look at inventory. It's deciding to think. Whoops. I just wanted to show you the fields in there. Flat fee, no. Antique, no. It's inventory. Clear, no. Oh, back to our bulb example. That was funny. So deposit percentage here, here, and here. These are the 3 boxes that live here. 1, 2, 3. And then 35%. Same goes right here. So These can vary, right? And a lot of, I would say that's so many questions. Like, well, what if it changes? What if it changes? That's no problem. Change it on the item level, make this 50%. But what is the most common? Because heaven forbid that you need to go in and type these 3 boxes every single time you create an item. The time billing rate menu has received a refresh. It was about a year ago or so. It also is, I would say, very user friendly. It's great. So this is the default box to that. There are and will be additional webinars specifically on how to use this module. But if you're not currently use it, either go into the knowledge base and find a previous one, or I'm sure there'll be newer ones coming up as well. This feature just got rolled out maybe a week or 2 ago, and so you could now default client images and attachments folders. So every single item has an images and attachments section. And if you go to upload files, you have a huge media library that Studio is storing on your behalf. So they're using Amazon's S3 server, and all of your images and PDFs and Word documents live here. And so hopefully your media library is organized in some sort of fashion. I like client folders versus vendor folders. I think it keeps information cleaner. You can now too, you could move items within the images and attachments folder. That's a newer release because before they were pretty much stuck. They were pretty much stuck in the folder that they lived in unless you wanted to delete them and move them. But so now, and you could also drag and drop. So you should only be dragging and dropping into the item if you set the default images and attachments folder on the client ID. This is a brand new release, so most clients don't have this filled out yet at all. We sent out a mass email last week to say, hey, this is a new release. Go into each client ID and tag this correct images and attachments folder. So that way you could now drag and drop into the item. So I'm going to save it here. It looks like I have more than one 19th Street, which is just super great and organized. 19th Street large. And so now I could drag and drop and it'll upload into the correct images and attachments folder. If you don't have that set, and I don't know this, Anthony, offhand, Robert and I actually tried to figure it out the other day. If you drag and drop and you don't have that folder set, is this the default folder? I don't know what folder it creates to hold all the images that don't have a home.
Good question. I don't know if that is it. Let me look as you go along and I'll just
Okay.
interrupt the
Yeah,
call.
I don't know that either. We played around with it briefly, but um then determined everyone should just set the images and attachments folder. I think that was where we left it. So
Okay.
I know, super helpful. So this is great. Just another really helpful hint and way of managing your items and speeding through getting those items and those images uploaded. So just like images and attachments lives on the vendor ID, it could now live on the client ID. You can upload contracts. I would say that's iffy. Maybe certain sections of the contract if you find it applicable. Notes are available on every vendor on every vendor ID, on every client ID. Sometimes the history here makes me laugh a bit. And here, like we talked about copy purchase being set on the company level, how do you typically want to manage your items? Do you want copy purchase to be turned on? So that way, anytime you update your purchase side, your vendor side will update, toggle it here. So my company preferences say that copy purchase is set to always. So when I set a new client, always will appear on. But if I want to turn it off, I could turn it off on the client level, and then I could also turn it off on the item level as well. So somebody's asking a really good question about a side mark. So if you're ordering a fabric and you need to side mark the code for the sofa that the company has given you plus your own side mark. So if you look, so side marks have some preferences under, let's see, would you like to save? I don't need to save now. Let's go to a purchase order. Hopefully we have one that is relatively decent. This one's not that decent. So your side mark is pulling from, right, company, meaning the company name. the client, the room, and then the item description. So if you need something specific on the side mark, adding it into your top line description, unless you wanted to even do, I would say create an even bigger, or use additional codes and then have a custom PO. This is the line that goes into your side mark. So if you need something called out here for the vendor, because all the other ones are basically formulas for vendor information, I don't know. Adding it into this line will automatically pull it into a PO, but only if your profile is set up that way. So, right, so we saw side mark in a number of different places. Sometimes too, like if you're not sure, go to Control F and type in side mark. And so we'll see anywhere that we want side mark configurations, right? So they're right here. Where are they else? They're right here. How do you want them to appear? Do you want it to be each item on the order or off? I don't know why they even allow you to turn it off, but they do. Side mark again, there, and then right here. How do you want it to appear again? Both item or description. So start with that. And then if you need something custom, obviously reach out, reach out if needed. Oh, and so we were doing quite a bit. Okay, so first tip. So we have our contacts set up. So if you're sharing, oh, actually, you know what? Let me show you one more thing before we go to sharing. So we're in this test item, which we should really rename. We don't have an image, but let's add some random stuff. We have several attachments, and we actually uploaded our vendor documentation. So this is my main image, and I have secondary images as well. When your images upload, they'll toggle to visible to client, visible to vendor. That I would say is normally how you want them to toggle, but that setting is located here. Settings, my company. Nope. Report. Yes. There's something that says attachments. Do you want to include attachments on proposals, orders and invoices? So at the moment, all of this is turned to off, but let's see what that means when we're actually creating our purchase orders and our proposals. So we now uploaded images, which say visible to client, visible to vendor, and we now uploaded documents. Documents do not come through as visible to client, visible to vendor. And we're going to name these to say order acknowledgement, RCC form, I don't know, invoice, and quote. The quote should be before invoice, but that's okay. And we're going to toggle these on to be visible to vendor because I want to hyperlink these to my order. So when I go to share PDF, because my optional items to display, this attachment is turned off because it's turned off here. If I want my additional items to display, I click attachments on, and I now have the ability to send hyperlinked documents from my item screen onto my order that I'm now also sharing directly with my vendor within Studio. So I set up my contacts to reflect all the people at First Dibs I need to communicate with. And I didn't mean to do that. Let me go to next. Because Joe at First Dibs is set up in my contacts correctly to be copied on every single order, Joe's email populates in here 2 times. I think Joe was set up in there twice. Steve is also set up there as a contact, and I'm able to preset this vendor message under email under my company profile, so that every single time I send an order, this very detailed sentence will appear. And so you could change this to say anything you want. So you don't have to email orders out of Studio. I would say we see 50-50 in terms of people that do versus people that don't. Beth, that's a great question. So can in my PO, which I think is also here, I have pictures running onto the second page. So, but I also had 2 pictures. So yes, this picture is appearing on page 2. You can't reformat this order format. You could create custom order, or you could create custom reports or custom forms. But if you wanted to use this particular format, you wouldn't have the ability within this screen to say, well, move this image here. You have the ability to take this image off of this purchase order if you want. You have the ability to say, okay, well, make these images really, really small because I'm trying to get them on one page. But, yeah, oh, hold on, let me see. Whoops. Here, the select theme, these are preset. So if you decided to change one of them, you would need to create a custom one and then select that custom order form when generating a purchase order and a proposal. They work the same way. Can you take your address off of each page? I mean, you could. I don't know why you would want to, right? Like, so this is pulling. Sorry, whoops. I don't know what it's doing. Oh, I clicked on it, so it wants to email. This is pulling from your company preferences. So remember, the standard reports are standard. They're memorized. They're memorizing fields and pulling from them. So if you wanted your email, if you wanted your information to not appear, you could either A, taking out of settings, but I wouldn't recommend doing that, or create a custom order where your information did not exist.
I think you can also turn it out and well, actually, yeah, that's what you're saying. Custom report, you'd have to do that. My fault. Never mind.
Yes, yeah. Um, how do you create multiple contacts? Oh, so yes, so when we go to First Dibs and go to contacts, and this works the same for vendors and clients. In your first address ID screen, you only have the option to create one email. But if you're looking to manage your contacts for all of your vendors and or clients, creating contacts here can be very, very helpful. So when I go to Joe and I go to edit his contact information, I let the system know that anytime I email Joe, I want him to be copied on an email generated out of Studio for an order. So I toggled that on. So that's why when I went to go to say email this First Dibs video, Joe's information automatically populated. And so Joe is in here twice, which is why his email was in there twice, and Steve was in there once. And I was in there twice because I'm copying myself and I'm now included. Let's make this actually Robert so it's not confusing. And so now Robert's email was changed. And so it's and this is actually asking you, how do you want the communication? Do you want it to be in the to field, right? So I want to email the order, or do I want to copy? Do I want a copy sent of the orders as well? So you could manage all of that within the contact section of the vendor and of the client. Something to make note of on the order itself. So now that I hyperlinked these, you don't have to send this purchase order out of Studio. You really can save this as a PDF and still email it out of your Outlook if that's something that you like and that you want to do. The hyperlinks will still work. As I mentioned, we're probably 50-50 with clients. Some clients use and send directly out of Studio, and some clients send directly out of Outlook. There was a question at the beginning that asked about when our learning sessions, and something about every Friday. But Anthony, I don't know, is there a webinar every Friday?
No, but I can address that. So, if you have not unsubscribed to the Studio Designer download email, that advertises all of our goings on at Studio Designer. So releases, new features, webinars that are coming up. So you can find it there. Also in our knowledge base, and this is something else that we could probably end on. Again, since this is a webinar focused on newer users, I want to make sure that everybody has a fair expectation of how they can get support, or at least how to effectively get support. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. Number one, we have an extensive knowledge base. That's probably the quickest way to get your um, instructional level how-to guides on certain aspects of Studio. That would always be my first go-to. Secondly, there's our Learning Hub, which is a part of our Help Center. However, it requires a different login. It's a free account that you can set up. In fact, let me do this. This will probably be much easier if I share with you all a visual. Hang on. There we go. Can you see Studio? Or no, you're not seeing Studio. You are seeing one of my
I'm not
mini.
saying anything.
There we go. That's Studio, right?
Yes.
Okay. So up here, you can click on user guide. That'll take you directly to all of our knowledge base articles. It's broken up by section. Should be familiar. They're all the modules on the left navigation bar in Studio. To get to the Learning Hub, which is where all of our previous recordings are held and stored, is the Learning Hub. So you go here, and then you'll need to sign in or create an account. It's free. All of the courses that or the webinars that have been pre-recorded are free. Some other odds and ends, but those would be the two for a visual and a written instructional form of support. So definitely make note of that. The other thing too is when you write in, either if you're emailing, support@studiodesigner.com, or you're going to use our chat assistant, to be the most effective, as much detail as possible. And if there's ever a chance where there's not a live agent that can take your chat, make sure, like, if there's some sort of specific example that you're looking at, throw some screenshots, or like, proposal number that you want us to look at, a specific item or client or setting or whatever. The more detail that you can provide, the sooner and quicker we can get you a response. And yeah, so chat, email, help center for both visual, for videos, and webinars and instructions. As far as the specific question about training webinars, if you just go into the help center and type in training event, I think that'd bring it up. Ah, there we go. So this one right here, live trainings and classes events. So you could come here to this page and literally sign up or register for any of these upcoming webinars that you see here. This is pretty updated, as we cycle out webinars each week. So this is where you can find all the ones that we have planned and scheduled for right now. Last thing I will mention is that anybody who just registers, let's say you can't attend today, but anybody that registers for any webinar, you'll get a copy of the recording emailed to you either by the end of the day of the webinar, if not the very next morning. So as soon as we're done here, we wrap this up. I'm going to download the recording, upload it to the Learning Hub, and then everybody here that registered, um, whether you made it or not, will get a copy of this recording emailed to you. Okay.
Anthony, somebody, I'm sorry, asked where they sign up for email blasts. Sorry if I missed that myself too.
No, 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 no. You're good. Yeah, you know what? It should be, I can't remember if there's an opt-in. I want to say that there is. I can always follow up with you, Beth, if
Okay.
need be. However, I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in going to any other training, you don't have to wait for an email. You can do it all right here. These are the ones that are going to be advertised in that same email for you. But yeah, so
Um,
that is the best way to get the support that you all are looking for.
Anthony, you could add my email to the email blast too. I would like to be on those.
All right, I can definitely do that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a
Absolutely.
great question, Beth.
Definitely, definitely. All right, well, folks, thank you so much again for joining us. It's
Ew.
always a pleasure to be providing you with content. Julia, thank you. As always, your knowledge surpasses
Oh,
all
golly.
understanding. So really, really appreciate that. And join us again for any other webinar that you feel will fit your need, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.
All right, talk to you all later.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.